Although she was married and well married too, Khadija was barren. A terrible destiny. Some people said it was because she was a witch and strong-willed. My grandmother muttered that it was a curse for disobedience and waywardness. If there was a curse, Khadija managed to ignore it. Khadija counseled my mother to buy a plot of land opposite a trucking business owned by her husband's oldest son by a previous wife. It was a new neighborhood, and now that Mogadishu had become the capital, Darod had begun moving in there. This area, Hodon, was cleaner and healthier than the center of town, where the graceful, old Italian buildings were surrounded by filthy, densely packed streets. The roads were unpaved in our neighborhood, and not many houses had electricity. Our house never did, but Ma bought the land. She moved into Khadija's place and began planning to build her own house. My mother's idea of a house emerged in fits and starts as materials became available. There were just 2 big rooms with whitewashed cinder block walls and a cement floor. The area in front of the main door was also cement. The rest was sand. Building this house took a long time. Everything was painted white, except the doors and shutters, which were green, the color my mother felt was appropriate for a proper Muslim door. The cooking fire was outside, under an awning, beside a tall talal tree, where a man might spread his mat in the shade on a hot afternoon. Khadija was a busybody, always directing other people's destinies and arranging marriages. My mother was young, and she didn't have much to do. It would not have been proper for her to work. Khadija suggested that she leave little Muhammad with her and go out, perhaps attend a literacy class. A young man called Hirsi Magan had just returned from a university in America, and he was teaching ordinary people in Mogadishu to read and write. That young man, Hirsi Magan, would become my father. When I was little, he was like a hero in a fable to me, only a little more real than my grandmother's werewolves. My father's older sister, Aunt Hawa Magan, used to come to our house and tell us stories about him, how he grew up in the northern desert. Their father, Magan, had been a legendary warrior. His name meant the protector, or more specifically, the protector of those he conquered. Magan was an Isman Muhammad, from the Darod subclan that always claimed the right to conquer and rule over other peoples. Magan had fought for King Boqor, who ruled the Machertan lands near the sea. And then around 1890, he switched allegiance to Boqor's rival, Kenadid, who was a younger man and more eager to wage war and lead raids. Boqor, Magan, and Kenadid were all cousins. Kenadid and Magan led their warriors through the southern lands of Sanag and Muduk, which were occupied by smaller clans, including many Hawiye. The Hawiye were passive people, mostly farmers, and they had no army. Magan despised them. There is a story that he had once Hawiye villagers gather stones into a circle and then handed them inside it to be killed. Then he commanded his warriors to take the women and settle there, on Hawiye land, north of Mogadishu. According to my grandmother, the Hawiye in the Muduk region never forgot the name of Magan. My father grew up in the northern desert, the son of Magan's last and youngest wife. She was 12 or 13 when she married the older warrior, who was close to 70. My father was Magan's youngest son, and the old man doted on him. When Magan died, my father was raised by his older brothers, some so old they already had grandchildren. They took him riding across the desert almost before he could walk. Magan's sons were rich and powerful traders and warriors. My father grew up well cared for, bright, self-assured, pampered. He became friends with an older man, Isman Yusuf Kenadid, the grandson of the Kenadid whom his father had served. Magan had always mocked this man. He was quiet and covered his mouth with a cloth, because words are not something you should waste. They should come out of deep, prior reflection. Eloquence, the use of fine language, is admired in Somalia. The work of great poets is praised and memorized for miles around their villages, sometimes for generations. But few poets or people had ever written down any Somali words. The schools the colonizers had left behind were simply too few to educate a nation that now consisted of millions of people. Usman Yusuf Kennedy was learned. He had invented a script to write down the sounds of the Somali language for the first time. People called it Ismaniya. It was slanted and curly and ingenious, and my father set about learning it. Usman was a good tutor, and he had many connections with the Italian colonists who ruled southern Somalia. My father, his protégé, began attending a school in Mogadishu, the Italians' colonial capital. He joined the Somali Youth League and had heated discussions about the future when the colonial powers who ruled over the great Somali nation could be cast off and one country formed to dazzle Africa. He learned Italian and even went to study in Rome for a period. This was a rare opportunity for a Somali, but Magan's descendants were wealthy. He married a woman, Marian Farah, from the Marehan subclan of the Darod. Then my father decided to attend college in the United States, Columbia University in New York. He was inspired by America. He used to say, if they can achieve what they have after only 200 years, then we Somalis, with our endurance and our resilience, we can make America in Africa. My father insisted that his wife Marian join him, and she began studying there too. Their infant daughter, Arro, born in 1965, was left behind in Somalia with her grandmother. When he graduated from Columbia with a degree in anthropology, he returned to Somalia, like many other privileged young men, to help shape the future of their nation. Marian had failed her course. He required that she stay in America until she completed it. It seemed only natural to him to proceed to the new nation's capital, Mogadishu. My father thought that if a bold new nation were to be established, then the people must be literate. He started a campaign to teach people to read and write. To set an example, he himself went to teach in one of the classes. In Somalia, language is precious. It's all that binds the warring clans into what passes for a single nation. People flocked to Hirsi Magan's literacy class in Mogadishu. He was dark-skinned, long-nosed, with a high forehead. My father had the charm of a rather intellectual crooner. Though he was not tall, he had a presence. People loved to be around him. All his life, they listened to him with respect. My mother was a graceful, clever poet in her own right, and became one of his best students. She learned quickly. One day, she even dared to contest the way her teacher pronounced a Somali word, flicking back her shawl with haughty disdain. It was daring of her and surprising. She was beautiful too, slim and tall, with a back as straight as a young tree. My father was attracted to my mother's clever tongue and her inflexible opinions. The attraction was mutual, and of course, Khadija encouraged them. My parents married in 1966. My mother knew that my father was still married to his first wife, Marian. But Marian was in New York, and my father did not inform her of his new bride. Marian learned of it when she returned to Somalia, of course. I don't know precisely when that was. There was always a strong electricity between my father and mother. They teased each other, challenged each other. In a culture that disapproved of choosing your own partner, they chose each other. Their bond was strong.